I'm going to tell you one of the most important stories in art history. It's one that maybe not every filmmaker or artist knows, but it's one that most have probably lived. It's going to change the way you view creative endeavors, and with any luck, it's going to free you to start your next great film. But before we get there, what makes something great? People say you need to have this incredible idea to make a great film, painting, song, or even a comedy bit. They say don't even bother starting until you have one. But what if a great idea isn't the genesis of it all? This is a story about one of the most well-known artists of all time, and his pretty average idea turned into one of the most breathtaking, magnificent, time-stopping works of art of all time. When World War I ended, it estimated that up to 22 million people died from 28 different countries. And out of this tragedy came a flow of iconic imagery, both photos of the real cruelty and harshness of war, but also art that highlighted the mental and emotional toll that would define a generation. Look at this painting called On the Wire by Harvey Dunn. The first thing you see is just the darkness that the soldiers are living in. The brushstrokes are sharp and chaotic. Everything in the foreground melds together, with just the three soldiers standing out. Those two soldiers exhausted by the war, now having to carry their fallen brother, it's a burden that they're going to carry long after they drop him off at the medical tent. This is just one example of art that came out of this time. Not long after the war ended in 1918, inspirational stories of courage, sacrifice, and determination began to flood our culture. Movies taking direct influence from the pictures and the art that preceded it. Arguably, these stories had a longer lasting influence than the tragedy of the war. In 1914, the collateral of the war began to pass by the front door of the one most sensational artist of all time, Claude Monet. Pushed by the heroism of the soldiers, Monet desperately wanted to contribute in some way, but being well into his 80s, he was just too old to go to war. But as with other artists, every tragedy that passed in his front door came stories of greatness. And with them, a new idea began to emerge in Monet's mind. On November 11, 1918, the war ended, and Monet wrote a letter to the French Prime Minister, telling him he was going to create a grand set of paintings and donate them to the world. In contrast to the brutality of the war, these would show the peace and the beauty that the men died for. This would start Monet on creating the greatest work of his already prestigious career, the water lilies. It's not much, Monet said, but it's the only way I have of taking part in the victory. So was a good idea the genesis of these great pieces of art, or was it the tragedy? If I said, I'm gonna go film this pond, you would say, that's stupid and will make for a bad video. But sometimes it's the tragedies of life that give the meaning, to make something that's normal into something that's profound. So as you're trying to come up with the next great idea for a film, ask yourself, what are the tragedies that I've faced? Is it rejection? Is it loss? Is it pain? How can I use these to influence my art and give it some deeper meaning? But it wasn't just Monet's age that was stopping him from going to war. Now, well into his 80s, he was also going blind. How could he paint this masterpiece and contribute to society when he could barely see anymore? From the beginning, Monet showed a high aptitude for painting. In 1951, at the age of 15, he was already painting commissions for money. But Monet had a bit of a rebellious streak in him, and by 1847, he and a group of misfits hosted an exposition in defiance of the then Organization of Art Standard. In this exhibition, this ragtag group of artists had completely abandoned the traditional art religious influence and began to just paint everyday life. They redefined what was acceptable in art. They stood against the standard and painted with this boldness. Fun fact, the term impressionist that would go on to define this group was originally meant as an insult. Monet and this group of ragtag artists would go on to paint some of the most iconic pieces of art of all time. But like I said before, now in his late 80s, he had developed severe cataracts. His unique use of brushstrokes and understanding of color that had defined him up to this point was completely compromised. He could no longer see any detail, and everything was dramatically discolored this orangish red. Look at this. This is how Monet saw the world. Look at the blues, the blacks, and the purples. They all look the same.
So what did Monet do? Did he just give up and throw in the towel and say, hey, I can't paint anymore, I can't even see? No, he did what all great artists do when they're faced with a limitation. They adapt, they overcome. He completely changed the way he painted.
He leaned into seeing orange and painted with the most beautiful blues. He gained this new understanding of freedom and darkness and put it on the canvas. Eventually, he decided to get surgery to remove the cataracts, but with it, the lens in his eye also came out. This required him to get a special set of glasses. Now, this is how he saw. To offset the loss of his lens, he painted with bigger strokes, more dramatic movements.
For most artists, regardless of the medium, whether it's painting or videography, losing your eyesight would be a complete career ender. But for Monet, it wasn't. This limitation drove him to understand painting in a new way. It pushed him to paint at a whole new level.
Every single film ever made was done through some sort of limitation, whether it's being created on small budgets. Older movies look amazing because they couldn't rely on CGI to do the heavy lifting. The special effects artists were forced to be creative to get the shots that they wanted. One perfect story of this is Jaws. In pre-production, they were trying to build this animatronic shark that was going to be featured throughout the whole movie. But during filmmaking, it kept breaking down. So the entire production had to be shifted. Now, instead of the shark being this main focus, it moved to be more of a looming unknown force. The movie's suspension builds and builds and builds as you get glimpses of it here and there. And then you experience it all at once with the characters on the boat at the end. It's just fantastic. It sticks with you your whole life. The story and the idea are way better because of the limitations that they faced. So again, I ask, is the idea the genesis of greatness? Or is it being forced to be creative as you run against roadblocks? Sometimes you just have to start and see what comes. Michelangelo encompassed the spirit of this when he was asked how he creates some of his beautiful sculptures. He says, I saw the angel in the marble, and I just carved until I set him free.
What are limitations you're faced with? Is it time, is it space, is it money, or is it something else? Instead of getting overwhelmed by all these limitations, think about how can you use creativity and those limitations to create something new. We all want to tell great stories, but sometimes the only way to tell one is by living one. Now this is great and all, but what happens when you come across a roadblock you can't get over, or something that's immovable and you just can't get over it?
This is a good time to talk about how Monet painted these practically. This failure of eyesight is not something that's easily overcome. It brought forward all the lessons he had learned throughout his career and put them to the test. So how did he do it? Well, he ended up just using the labels on his paints to know what color to use. Think about this. Think about how well you have to understand color theory, how to make colors by combining the exact right amounts of each. This is not just something you can just wake up and do. It's something that has to be worked on for years and years through trial and error.
So the question is, what are you doing now in the quiet that's going to prepare you for that unforeseen failure, for that big moment? If Monet hadn't been so studious in his early years about understanding colors and knowing what they looked like, he wouldn't have been prepared for this failure. So, what are you doing right now that's preparing you?
As the project went on, he had a vision for this painting and what it would look like when it was done. It would be placed in one big, round room that completely surrounded the viewer and immersed them. But the problem was no such room existed. But he wasn't dissuaded by this roadblock. I mean, he had overcome not being able to see. So he began to try to find alternatives. The Prime Minister ended up coming along and proposing this new place. It was 2 smaller oval rooms instead. There's an argument to be made that one large room would have made the viewer feel too disconnected from the paintings, less immersed. So these 2 smaller rooms really make you feel like you're in the painting. This inability to find the ideal room created something so much better. There's a process that stand-up comics go through, and it's the mentality that drove me to start this YouTube channel. It's the way they refine their sets. They go to small clubs and just try out jokes. Then they rewrite and try again. What delivery causes the biggest laugh? And they keep trying and trying and trying until something's really, really funny. Essentially what they do is they fail on purpose to find the best path.
We gotta change the way we view failure in art. Yeah, something, Thomas Edison. But they're more than just learning moments. The failures become part of the art. They drive you to what the end product's gonna look like. They become part of the beauty. You wanna tell a story of a hero overcoming something? Well, overcome something yourself in the creation of the art in the first place.
The idea for one of the greatest pieces of art wasn't even fully formed until well into the process of creation. It became the best version possible through overcoming the failures along the way. So ask yourself, what failures have you faced, and how can you use that to refine your art and refine yourself.
And one last lesson about failure. Monet died before he saw his work hung up in the exhibit. And a lot of people would see that as sad or depressing, but I don't.
Creating isn't about the ending of it all. It's about taking tragedy and making it beautiful. It's about overcoming your limitations to expand your creativity. It's about refining your failures into greatness. My name is Sam Johnston, and thank you so much for watching.